Hello there! What are questions that players ask at each individual skill level? You'll notice that they range pretty wildly depending on the person that's asking, whether it be about sandbox, the game systems, or maybe how to build a little bit better. Now, I've learned a lot over the 2,000 hours that I've had playing this game, and not everything that you learn about the game can necessarily be found in the game's tutorial. So, hence the purpose of this video. We'll be formatting this from beginner to expert questions, and they won't just be limited to the management side of the game. It'll be little aspects of every part. If you see a question that grabs your eye, you can skip to it in the timestamps below. The first question is the most common on Reddit, although it's also the most frequently downvoted. I want to buy a Planet Coaster game, but I have to choose one. Which one is better? Planet Coaster 1 has better management features and feels better paced and thought out with its underlying systems, but Planet Coaster 2 has significantly higher ceilings for what's possible in Sandbox. It's as close to an AutoCAD program as I have seen before, while still being a video game at the same time. Which one you choose depends on your general interest in using creativity for fun in your free time. If it doesn't seem like Planet Coaster 1 is your cup of tea either, I'd highly recommend Pickpocket as a game which serves as a sequel in spirit to old isometric RCT games. Number 2. Is Planet Coaster 1 or 2 better for creating dark rides? Planet Coaster 2 by a long shot. The perspective darkens in areas which have overhead cover, meaning rides and coasters in these areas remain dark even during the daytime. This mostly matters for highly detailed dark ride blueprints. Rescaling objects is also possible in the second game, meaning you can fine-tune characters, props, and doors among many other things. Number 3. I want to build stuff, but don't know where to start. Any ideas? A blank canvas can be super stressful. I've got some ideas for you. Look through your house for any hanging photos or paintings. If they depict buildings, take a picture and try to recreate it. You can decide what to do with it later, but modeling can be super fun. Do you play other games? Try to take inspiration from some of their landscapes, towns, or even procedurally generated structures. You might simply see a coaster on the workshop with no scenery on it that you want to put in your park somewhere. Purposefully inset it into the ground and dig it out. Then you might have some ideas on what to surround it with or theme it as. Take all of the scenery in the park and start moving it around a flat ride or coaster. This approach is less creative, but it's about as impressive as anything else, given you have the patience for it. It could even spark a larger idea after you have it in the park already. If you're playing in any mode which uses economy, what challenges are you working around? What's the franchise target? Can you use any natural details in the map as set dressing for a coaster or something substantial to the park? And one more thing you could do is look at how parks do things in real life. What safety measures are put in place to make sure guests are safe from all areas they're supposed to be? Ask yourself questions like that and research. You'd be surprised how well these sorts of things can turn out. Number 4. How can I stop building boxes? Try using half walls and offset them in places that make sense to bring walls into the third dimension. When you're adding windows to buildings, you can go beyond simply adding a window over the top of something and instead make an actual cutout of the wall for the window to sit inside. The downside of that sort of building style is that it takes ages and effort to get everything just right, but it's so worth it. When you get to roofs though, separating certain blocks from their respective groups and moving them with the gizmo on their own can be a way to make just enough of an overhang without that annoying visual glitching that comes with texture overlap. Depending on the style you're working in, asymmetry can be exactly what the build needs. Additionally, if you really want your builds to stand out, scrutinize every detail of picture references if you're using them, and attempt to recreate little pieces of depth using supports and objects with scale down to 5 and 10% respectively. Number 5. What are the limits of blueprint uploads to the workshop? 8,000 pieces and 5 attractions of any type that's not a pool. I wouldn't really recommend putting more than 2 attractions in your blueprints for ease of use anyway. 8k pieces is pretty generous, but can be tricky to cram into a single item if you like to build like Wix or Mineral. Number 6. Guests aren't using the pool blueprints I'm putting down. Why? Pool heaters were added into the last update, but the original pool blueprints didn't get updated to include those heaters in the schematic. You'll need to add them in manually for any pre-update pool blueprints or your own designs. Number 7. How do I fix guests getting launched at hard surfaces? I had this happen on the Lazy River Styx flumes in my campaign park. What ended up working for me was deepening the pool that guests were getting launched to. Another alternative that seems to work on the surface is adding in lazy river jets so that they push guests away from the spot they land in, making it less likely that they collide with other guests already in the pool. I'm not sure that that's really a problem, but it's better to be safe than sorry. It might also be important to assess the flume's exit. If guests are swaying a bunch when they get launched into the pool, it could be that they're hitting a surface that doesn't quite look like a surface from our point of view. Adjusting some of the turns into that last bit could be all the change you need. Number 8. Why can't I finish my coaster and connect it back to the station? Autocomplete is your friend. Click that button and you'll have a finished track piece suggested, which you can use to finish out the rest of the ride. Number 9. I'm trying to build coaster elements which are constantly obstructed when I try to place them, even in midair. Is there something I'm doing wrong? Sadly, no. I'd recommend to anyone that hasn't already, please turn off all collision in your settings. The fewer headaches you have to deal with when you're building, the better. Number 10. Why is campaign so difficult? This has something to do with the last update not really being in parity with the existing tutorials, and also the fact that the campaign didn't actually explain the systems behind the objectives, what the conditions of the park were, and how much money you get for completing objectives, if any. It's supposed to teach you about the game's systems, but does a poor job at the present moment, since many of the things about it are confusing to newer players. Number 11. I closed my park for a few hours, and after opening, I don't have the same number of guests. Did I do something wrong? It's most likely that your guest experience in the park rating breakdown reset. Just give it some time and you should see the same number of crowds that you had before. Why are there annoying lines in the middle of my paths? The path foundation between one set of paths and the next is mismatched. Make sure the whole line of path has the same toggle for path foundation either on or off. Number 13. Why am I losing money in a park I'm charging entry for? This is a simple question with a more complicated answer, but to keep it more simple, the answer is that Planet Coaster 2 is not designed around the entry charging model of pricing. This is made evident by the most recent update adding in maintenance charges for rides. The entry pricing structure always lagged behind charging for rides, but the upkeep costs brought down the efficiency of almost all forms of money-making. Besides rides just costing more to operate, the root of this issue is perfectly summed up by a quote by Extra Life on the Planet Coaster subreddit. Guests' tolerance for park entry pricing now seems to decline way too fast to make the park entry viable for new parks. Number 14. Is staff zoning an assignment really this cumbersome? Yes, and the process is this. First, you must make a staff zone by painting it in from the staff menu. Next, you need to hire an employee that you want assigned to that area. You must then assign them to the new zone you painted, their rest facility, and the place of their work if they operate stalls or rides. You have to do this using advanced menus and by hour. It is extremely tedious, and the optimizations of needing 2 or 3 less staff members is not worth the time required to set up complicated staff shifts and zones. Just overhire staff, and you'll always be fine. Number 15. Does staff zone prestige have anything to do with park performance? Nope. You can ignore most of the statistics in that menu, although it can help you see neat things like previous day income and ridership the day before from a menu which is not related to a single ride. This means you can get an aggregate of a bunch of rides using the zoning feature, which is arguably the only useful thing about staff zones. Number 16. What am I supposed to do about all these pickpockets? Turn off security notifications, and make sure you have enough security and thorough camera coverage. It's not worth the constant distractions whenever someone gets their wallet stolen. Now we're getting into some of the intermediate questions. You might hear some of these after a person has been playing Planet Coaster for about 50 to 100 hours, or sometimes it can go clear into the thousands of hours. Number 17. Is there a flat ride sequencing spreadsheet for Planet Coaster 2 like there was for the first game? There is. I happen to be the author of it too. If it's something you're interested in using, check the video description. If you still don't understand those numbers or what the significance of those figures there is, I'd recommend my updated Flat Rides and Prestige video, which will be linked in a card here. I also break down scenery bonuses and reputation in that video as well, if you're interested. Number 18. What's the main difference between challenge and franchise mode? Franchise mode is essentially locked on a difficulty you determine when loading into a location. Each location comes with a preset quirk, like guests needing food and drink more than normal, or the guest cap limited to 4,000 instead of the traditional 6,000. Some of those modifiers can either help or hurt your chances to place high on the leaderboards, and in doing so you can unlock profile banners and backgrounds to flex on people who don't really care about it much in the first place. In challenge mode, you choose the difficulty and generally start with significantly fewer resources than franchise mode lets you have. To balance this, you'll be given objectives with cash prizes so that you have a bit of a side quest on your mission to reach 5 stars. If you tend to like sandbox play but want a blend of both, challenge mode can provide you some much needed direction if you're going into the park without a real plan. Number 19. What's the best advice for someone trying to get better at building blueprints instead of parks? I've got 4 different tips for you. The first is to take apart works you admire and separate them into their objective components. Especially if you're working in that style already, it helps to have everything laid out in front of you before you do any of your own work on your own stuff. The second is, don't build boxes. But if you must start from a box, find ways to break up the shape as much as possible so it's less obvious and more visually interesting. This could mean something like pillars, functional offshoots, or ruins depending on the type of theme. The third I'd say is use reference images. Your work doesn't need to be one-to-one, but having something to look back to can really help you focus on the elements of your build if accuracy is your aim. The fourth point here is don't be afraid to just try things. If they don't work out, it's okay. You're growing as a builder and an artist, and although you may not immediately see the forward progress, that does not mean that it isn't there. Number 20. Is there a way to build a restaurant kitchen box using grid pieces which don't clip over the counter? Annoyingly, not without having at least 4 separate gridded groups. Half walls and fine detailing are required here if you want to make use of the building and retain all the textures that come with it. Number 21. How can I eliminate Z-fighting? Offset objects which are conflicting in texture ever so slightly and the problem will be replaced with quote-unquote seams or imperfections in the wall. The trick to these is to either cover them up with trim or make them so small that they are unnoticeable from guest view or perspectives you value in your park. Number 22. Why can't I smooth my slides? This is a byproduct of the developers porting over the coaster smoothing system to Flumes. Since there is no such thing as banking on a Flume, the game gets very confused when you are attempting to smooth all instead of just turn in height. Even so, Flumes are insanely tough to smooth, and they will fight you to the bitter end if you try to edit them in post. Save yourself the headache, build a good Flume to start with, and the physics of the guests in the tube will do the rest of the smoothing work. Number 23. What's going on with the rare ride service cost bug? There's a well-known issue in the current patch where, out of nowhere, your parks with economy and ride service charges turned on have a very small chance to drop your park's balance into the negative. And this could take place even if you had 100 to 200k in the bank. The running theory as to why has to do with a ride operator being vacant for long enough that the guests in the line start to walk out of the queue. Afterward, the ride might get maintained by a mechanic to update the guests in the line, and this for some reason would trigger once for every guest in the queue. Again, this isn't known for sure, but it's likely to be a strong lead. If this ends up happening to you, you might be able to re-upload a previous save and change the conditions that lead to the huge bill if you're quick enough. Number 24. How can I build good custom vertical loops? Silverette has a video about exactly this. It's called Smooth and Easy Custom Loops, and a link to it will be in the description. It's a great place to start if you don't want to get into making all your inversions entirely custom. Number 25. Is Priority Pass worth it to add to my rides? The short answer is no. The long answer is in a video where I explain all the current problems with the priority system and its drawbacks. If you need to make more money, there are more effective methods like better ride sequences. With that all said, if you're building priority queues for optics' sake and aren't experiencing significant problems, then by all means keep at it. Number 26. Are cable cars bugged? Sadly, yes. Most of the transport rides have unique quirks to them, but none are felt quite as heavily as they are on cable cars. When they need serviced for maintenance purposes, the whole ride bricks and stops moving entirely. Guests will queue but cannot use it. You can toy around with it to try and get it to work again, but it's very tricky in my experience, and they're notoriously problematic if ride breakdowns are turned on. Number 27. I'm always hearing about creator-run challenges. Is there a place I can find these? There is, and I happen to run the Discord server, which serves as something of a hub for them. If you want to join it, you can find the link in the description of any video you see on my channel, including this one. Number 28. Do I actually have to refurbish my generators every time I get a pop-up for them? Interesting question. Although the output of generators does lower over time and requires mechanics to maintain their high output, there's nothing saying you can let them downgrade clear down to 0% and they will still produce power. With that said, it's still a good idea to refurbish them when they hit around 35 to 40% efficiency. And turning all of those generator alerts off is something I advocate for any sane player to do. Number 29. Can I change the viewed elevation of staff zones, pipes, and power cables? Unfortunately not. The less you have to deal with these systems on maps with highly variable elevation, the better. Number 30. My coasters are always so rough. How can I improve? There is a general format of smoothing where you build the entire layout in 4-meter segments and then take 3 pieces and smooth all maneuvers forward and backward across the layout with high strength. After doing something like this, it's a lot of fine-tuning and time to get it exactly the way you like it. And this method doesn't work on every coaster. Keep in mind for inversions, turn off bank offsetting so that the game doesn't yell at you when you do insane elements like death rolls, Immelmans, or even custom vertical loops. About bank offsetting, consider what type of coaster you're working with and what makes the most sense to incorporate. Most of the time, -1 is what you're looking for. But stuff like the X Dimension and Wing coasters are significant outliers that do not want offset banking at all. Do some research into the type of coaster you're working on, and that'll inform your decision further. Number 31. Do Flume platforms need to have spiral staircases leading to them? They do not. For example, the first 2 preset slides in the menu have entrance gates instead. If you're building your own, the key to switch between this entrance and the spiral staircase will be shown in the bottom right corner of the screen. By default, the toggle is Control on keyboard. Number 32. How can I get guests to vomit less after intense or nauseating rides? If the problem you're having is with seeing vomit on the ground more often, meticulously zoning a few janitors for a small space can be a solution. Another alternative is moving the ride exit to a main arterial so that free roam janitors see messes more often. Regardless of what you choose to do, having benches right at the exit of a ride can provide a useful buffer so that a guest which is on the verge of throwing up might not if they have a rest after the ride. More dramatic measures include purposefully choosing worse ride sequences which have lower nausea ratings. It might hamstring guest interest or profitability. I'll leave you to decide if that trade-off is worth it. Number 33. Is there any way to turn off the annoying camera jump that happens when I place track of any sort? If you have the construction panel open, go into Settings, then Camera Mode, and then change the toggle from Attach and Rotate to Free. After this adjustment, your camera will no longer adjust position when you place new track. Number 34. Can you realistically fit a log flume or rapids in a larger body of water without making the channel hover over the water? It is possible to make it work better if the water body is a set of water geometry objects. Just offset the position of the top of the water slightly below the channel, and the texture of the water in the flume or rapids will overlay that of what's lower, and in the way you want them to. It might take a bit of recoloring work, but you can make something really convincing here. Number 35. How can I go from enjoying other people's amazing creations to creating my own? If you're not quite to the point where you know the purpose and use case of most pieces, I'd actually suggest taking builds you admire, breaking them down into all their individual parts, and reusing them in your own build. Laying it out like that can make the whole process feel so much less daunting, and more like you're getting inspiration from already stellar builds. If you're the organized type, look at the pieces you think are really interesting and look them up in the scenery menu. Give them a favorite so that you can build with really versatile and interesting pieces in the future. If you want some examples, I find anchor plates, Viking stone trims, and all manner of supports to be exceptionally useful. Number 36. How can I level up my interior designs? Start really considering and understanding how guest scale works. Use a stone guest next to your builds regularly so you can capture the scaling concept a little bit better. Constant use of helpful reference images and even bringing some real items close to your desk can really help make interiors feel convincing and lived in, if that's the idea you're going for, anyway. I have a small objects prop kit for you to make your own props if you can't find a specific niche item which is up to your standards. The code and link will be in the video description. Now we're going to start getting into some questions which I think experts would ask, or in some cases, experts have found the answer that nobody is asking the question for. Number 37. Are entrance gates just infinite water and power? Yes. Given you have the money, you can use entrance gates en masse as a no-nonsense and no-investment way of supplying your park with power and water filtration. It has the worst ratio of utility resources to money spent, but in something like a speedrun setting, it's actually just better to place a dozen gates for their power and water output alone, so the runner can get back to rapidly placing high-impact infrastructure. Also, they don't need mechanics to maintain them. Number 38. Can you attach scenery groups to moving platforms? You can indeed. Move the scenery group first, tap shift to get the game into a state where you can add the group to another cluster of scenery objects, and then click again to add the group on top of the moving platform. If the highlighted square came up as you placed it, that means the objects are now in place on the platform, and will move along with its animations. Number 39. Can we do anything to make the flat ride platform paths disappear? Yes, and without mods too. By taking the corner of a Flume platform and moving it 0.03 meters at a time, you can slowly erase the path like a printer etches ink into paper. There's a bit of a quirk to this though, as the entrance and exit need to be connected by path no matter what. If that's not something you care to spend an hour of your time doing, you can find a bunch of minimal path flat ride types on the workshop by searching their name or the keyword reduced. The user's name is planet_coaster in all capitals. Number 40. What's the method to actually make the most money? This is a simple question with a pretty complicated answer, since it requires all of you to understand everything you need to know about the game's mechanical systems. A more fitting way to put this question is, how do I speedrun the game? To avoid rehashing a different guide, I'll boil it down to this. Raft flumes can go through more than a guest per second, and with high ticket prices to boot, without maintenance charges, you only need everything a water park might need, and a very efficient design which you intend to copy and paste to get the most of. You should very quickly be able to afford all the scenery you could ever dream of. Number 41. Is there any way for me to edit the workshop items when I'm not already in-game? The workshop can be accessed online on the official planetcoaster.com website. It will appear as one of the top menu options, and it has a drop-down where you can log in. You can even subscribe and rate items you're interested in from there. Number 42. What's the best item for scenery score? Firefly Jar, which only costs $4.50 and grants a whopping 1200 scenery score, which exceeds most other items in the game by a borderline concerning margin. You can place these as the only scenery item in your park, and the park rating won't be affected by the lack of variety. Number 43. What's the most interesting thing you've learned about the pathing tools? It turns out the edit tool for guest paths can also modify queue paths, despite that option not being under the queue part of the menu. It makes very wide or thin queues possible, with almost completely customizable shapes. If you have a cool pre-show planned for a ride, you can do some really interesting things by contorting the line shape. Number 44. Why are guests ignoring my well-themed ride? What sort of ride is it? If it doesn't get to the threshold for it to reach classic reputation around 6 in-game days, then it'll receive a 40% penalty in guest interest compared to other rides. From this understanding, adding scenery to get the full plus 200 bonus will help. Reworking the ride sequences, routing paths so that the ride is easier to access, and even making other rides less appealing can be a way to encourage guests to use the one you're worried about. Otherwise, check that the paths are all connected. Even disconnect some that look problematic and reconnect them. You could even try disabling the priority queue if you have it. As a last resort, you can disable reputation in sandbox settings, and that can help immensely if you were having issues with the ride having less than 500 prestige. Number 45. What's this scenery tool all about? If you attach most objects to a roller coaster train, ride, or moving platform, and go into the gizmo settings, you will see a cog or gear icon all the way on the right, symmetry menu, and it is basically a huge time-saving feature that Frontier doesn't advertise publicly through campaign or otherwise. It can be tricky to figure out at first, but it can drastically speed up your building process if you need to make something detailed with a unique, symmetrical shape. Number 46. Is it possible to inflate the guest numbers in my small park? Let's rephrase the question. How do I increase the number of attractions statistic in the park rating menu without ruining the small park aesthetic? There's a sneaky trick you can do by putting down a park entrance and its gate separated by a facility of some kind. As long as the guest spawner side is the one connected to a main path with rides, all of those rides count towards the maximum, and no guests will ever use the layout of this path. If you hide a network of rides underground like this, you effectively have the look you want for your park without the hassle of finding places for these rides to go. Is it better than if it were just a setting we could adjust? Not really, but this is the next best option we have given the current state of the game. Number 47. Is there an easier way to handle custom supports than copying and eyeballing it? Try snap to position for longer sections, and align position of support beams with the skew of the track. Additionally, if you build to the world grid and reset rotation often, you'll find that you can make some pretty convincing looking realistic supports. The more you study how supports work for coaster types in real life, the more you'll grasp how they need to be constructed in game, and what seems reasonable to get away with. You might be surprised at how strange they can look sometimes. The final product is what matters. Number 48. I don't want to shift coaster friction, but should I? My trains are running out of speed too quickly to be realistic. Different models of coaster require different friction values to be realistic. A good general rule to go by is lowering by a tick or two so the coaster finishes the course strong. In reality, there are plenty of modifiers which play into the speed of the coaster, like wheel lubricant grade, temperatures, track age and condition. The list goes on. Number 49. What can recolorable rocks accomplish? On top of being whatever shade you determine they should be, you can tone them down in brightness and saturation to show how the rocks are wet. Similarly, switching them to green hues near static water can give the impression that they are mossy without using those ugly flat moss textures. Number 50. Do benches and bins necessarily need to go on paths? No, but their properties are limited. They cannot be resized or rotated, but you can place them in areas where you don't want guests to use them. The method of doing this is entering the advanced move tool by dragging to an empty spot on the screen and then selecting the bin or bench in question. Move it with the gizmo from here, and it's all customization from here. And that is all 50 questions answered. Were there any that you're still confused by? Or did you have any questions that didn't get answered from this video? Let me know in the comments, and potentially I'll make a follow-up to this video answering questions that I didn't get to this time. With that all said, thank you for watching, have a good one, that's an order, follow a good soldier. Bye YouTube.